IDW Sonic Comic Issue 23. The story starts out with Sonic running along the ground as there's a thunderstorm when the arc's already depressing enough. Why are we being shown Tails talking to Sonic with the same dialogue as 2 issues ago? Padding, that's why. At first I assumed it was going to show Tails telling Sonic that he lost the data to the cure and his reaction to it. Sonic stands around, seeing that Barricade Town fell too. Why is he just standing around? Doesn't Tails need him to keep running? I thought he did nothing but run when Tails was doing his thing because he was needed to keep gathering data. And all I needed is a second to see what happened to the town. You think he'd just run away right after this and make sure that it wouldn't spread. But he wants to conserve his energy, I guess. So Sonic keeps standing still and risking the infection spreading as he thinks. He thinks about the fact that if someone gets a lucky hit on Tails' gizmo, they'll lose out on the data, and wonders if it'd be stupid to risk going to save even one person when Tails needs a cure for everyone. If he's thinking this, there's no excuse for him not learning from it. You'd think he'd put the gizmo in his shoe, actually, so that nobody would be able to damage it, if he's worried about it getting damaged. He sees Eggman on top of the gate. It's convenient that they're both in the same place. Maybe it's a fake Eggman, like a doll or Metal Sonic. Nope, it's Eggman, who can't get the Robians to do what he says no matter what the frequency. And Eggman relatably says it's tedious and he should have rigged an automated version to play from the spaceship. Why didn't he do that then? He's supposed to be smart, and he almost never comes off that way. Boom Eggman is a lot more genuinely smart than him. Starline says wideband broadcasts have no effect, and they agree a tightband localized attempt was the best next step. Stupid techno-babble jargon. How about make stuff happen in the plot instead of boring us? Eggman's too easily offended by Starline and calls him passive-aggressive, which is kind of justified because he's in a bad mood here. He says he'd better have his back, as if he didn't before, and Snarking ever implied that. Starline says it would have been smart to have a failsafe for the metal virus mutating beyond his control. We already saw him say this too. And how much is the infection spreading when Sonic's standing still listening to them talk? Eggman asks if they're going the wrong way, and asks him about his warp Topaz. He says to imagine what he could do if he hooked it up to the Chaos Emerald aboard the spaceship, if he can warp space-time to create portals with just a small electrical charge. Why does he think this will get the Robians in line? What does that have to do with Robians? Isn't it obvious that if he warps space-time too much, he'd destroy the world? Worst case scenario, he'd make a portal too big and suck the world into it. This is reminding me of early Archie, where Snively wanted to make a portal to try to get rid of the Freedom Fighters. It was like a portal to the void, and Robotnik was the one telling Snively that that was too reckless. Well, Snively didn't care. And now it's Eggman who's being reckless like Snively. Only replace portal to the void with who knows where. Starline explains that in his early experiments, anything above a light-controlled charge resulted in extreme reality alteration. And he expects Eggman not to be tempted by that when he says that? He could have just told him that the world could end up destroyed. So is this foreshadowing that Eggman will try to rewrite all of reality again? Why won't he take the warp Topaz in his sleep and do that as soon as night hits? Archie had a ton of deep continuity to rewrite with the Genesis Wave to start from scratch. Not that it started from a clean slate anyways. At least a reboot wave here would get rid of the metal virus, right? Even the concept of a reboot wave just seems too confusing and meta for me. It'd be simpler to just call it a wave that makes time get pushed backwards, undoing a lot of stuff. Like the first Genesis wave, that makes time get pushed 5 years backwards. Because it couldn't be a wave that literally started things from the beginning, or they'd be at the beginning of time. They'd all be dead. Starline tells Eggman that his planet's dangerous. Eggman says it'll be fine if they're cautious. How does he expect to be cautious with that? Starline tells him that he's anything but cautious, and he's yet to inoculate them to the metal virus. By that, I guess he means that they're not immune either. I remember I said at the start of the arc that if Eggman was really smart, he'd have done that. Eggman says there is no vaccine, and Starline is actually surprised by this and asks how he was going to protect them from infection. And I can't believe Starline even thought Eggman had a vaccine when he was calling him out on not being cautious. It makes sense that Eggman says, by not touching the Zombots, duh. Starline asks, what if there was a spill in the spaceship, or a mishap in the field, or it mutates and becomes airborne? Yeah, the whole time I was thinking about how it could be worse if it was airborne. If it spread as easily as a certain virus in real life, everyone would be screwed just from being close to the Robians, without even having to touch them. I was thinking about that when there were so many of them in a crowd. It was unusually cautious of Eggman to not just make them airborne in the first place. He could have made them airborne after making himself and Starline immune, and that would have worked. Eggman says he's nitpicking, and Starline satisfyingly says, it's not nitpicking, it's common sense! I know how he feels. This just makes Flynn look like Eggman. I heard that he can't handle constructive criticism of his writing. Doesn't that make him like Eggman in this specific sense? I get why Eggman is saying this though, because he thinks the things that Starline's warning him about would never happen. Sonic shows up and taunts them, and then he expects them to tell him why he did it. Wasn't immediately obvious? How do you not already figure out he wants to remove free will? Why is he putting himself in danger instead of just running off the metal virus? Instead he's standing there and letting it spread. If he was more pragmatic, he'd just infect them both so that they wouldn't be able to operate the spaceship and spill tons of it anymore. They'd be less dangerous that way. And he thinks Tails is going to make a cure for it anyway, so there's no reason not to do it. I hope he's at least planning on threatening to infect them to get information. He could threaten to infect them to attempt to make them make a cure. The whole story I was wondering if they were going to kidnap him. Still, he just thought about the fact that he can't risk anything happening to Tails' gizmo. And yet he's going right up to the bad guys anyways. I assume he forgot he even had the gizmo on him. Sonic asks Eggman why he chose to go back to being a mad scientist, and cathartically asks him what was wrong with being Mr. Tinker. Eggman just says that's not who he is, and Sonic asks why he won't be like him. Why doesn't he remind Eggman of the fact that Eggman was clearly happy that way? Eggman mocks the idea of being a charitable person who fixes things without explaining what the problem with that is. Then, shockingly, he looks over at the swarm of Robians under him as if he's regretting what he did and says, living on, grateful smiles, listening to children's laughter, day in, day out, making things people need and use. Is this just a tease that'll piss us off for leading to nothing, or is the writing being surprisingly nuanced and having him be convinced to make a cure after all? He surprisingly admits to Sonic that his life was relaxing back then. Then he says that he's doing something better by bringing peace and unity to the world and providing with his brilliant guidance. Why doesn't Sonic immediately say that the reason he's not is that the Robians aren't being controlled by him anyways? At least Eggman makes sense here. He's a well-intentioned extremist. It kind of makes sense that he'd think he's doing the right thing because he thinks he's smart, so he'd make a good ruler. If Morty could be like this, if he was made a genius, then that makes sense. Eggman relates to Sonic that they're not that different because both of them won't change. This kind of scene isn't the right tone to have characters quote lyrics from a song of the series. This kind of thing was always unprofessional and took me out of the story. Sonic says he's either gonna reverse the metavirus or else. What makes him think he can or will? Eggman says no one can stop it, and all that's left is to find a way to command the Robians and he'll rule the world. Sonic says Tails will handle it and he'll handle him, doing one last fight before they'd lock him away forever. Does he know this will infect Eggman? And again, he does realize Tails needs his gizmo to do that, right? Starline thinks that while he had dreamed of seeing Sonic and Eggman fight for his hand, all he feels now is apathy. He thinks that Metal Sonic was too brash and thought overwhelming power would win the day with no proper plan. He thought it was because he was designed as a counter to Sonic, but the first bio data he downloaded was Eggman's. And he has the same brute force strategy. Can the plot progress instead of us seeing this? We know all of this. He thinks that Eggman just doesn't measure up. It makes sense that he'd snap out of it. It was foreshadowed from the beginning, because even though he does admire him, they don't think in the same wavelengths. Sonic jumps on Eggman, threatening to infect him, and they both fall out of the Eggmobile. Eggman tells the Robians to stay back, and is confused that it worked. Starline reveals that he found an effective command signal. Oh, that's convenient. I don't see why this worked and not anything else. The whole different frequencies thing is too convoluted. What, were they speaking to the Robians with Eggman's voice altered in pitch over and over? In a different pitch every time? Starline wonders if he won't have to use his own plans after all, and wonders if Eggman will learn from this. Eggman says excellent work, and then tells them to upload that frequency to the spaceship so he can command the Robians. I'm guessing Starline won't do that. Sonic conveniently reveals that he can spin dash straight upwards, so high that he can spin dash through the bottom of the Eggmobile. So he has the Sonic X jump in IDW. At least that's another difference from the games. But it feels like a Deus Ex Machina here. I thought he couldn't jump out of the city, and that was the whole tension. So he foils Eggman's plan, and Eggman holds something below Starline saying to pick him up. Starline says there's too much weight. They both crash into the city, and Eggman calls Sonic an idiot because now the Robians can't be controlled and they'll destroy Eggman's factories along with everything else. Sonic cathartically suggests that now they have to work on a cure. Can they just run it off already? Eggman isn't on board with that plan, as we see that out of nowhere, the Robians can actually try to climb the walls. What took them so long to do this? I guess they're really recently turned. So either Eggman infected this place directly, or Robians actually climbed up the walls from the outside to get here. So Starline creates a portal to save him and Eggman, instead of Eggman getting roboticized here like I was hoping for at this point. He's not gonna do any creative new plan in this arc. What's the point of keeping him around if literally all he's gonna do from now on is dump Metavirus? It's not like it's early Archie where every issue he has a creative new plan. Eggman says this is a Pyrrhic victory, but Sonic should really just run off while he's saying this and avoid it being one. Eggman shows some consequences to this all by saying his head hurts, and Starline says the upload failed. At least that happened to him as well as happening to Tails. He says they can start from scratch. Eggman doesn't feel like bothering. That reminds me of Fleetway Robotnik when he felt like destroying the world. If he was in that mindset and he was completely giving up on ruling the world entirely, that makes this make a bit more sense. But instead he still wants to rule the world. Eggman says it's too risky to use it at a close range. It only got dangerous because Sonic attacked them. They were safe floating above them in the Eggmobile. Eggman assumes out of nowhere that maybe the Metavirus's newer versions are adapting to resist the frequency, and he doesn't feel like going through all of that tedium again just for it to not work. Eggman just wants to infect to wherever they are, and says that it'll think of something. I don't know why the idea of making a flying nanobot army that can reprogram all of the Metavirus patients directly isn't an immediate idea for him. Am I seriously smarter than Eggman? I'm not a gadgeteer like him, but I have better common sense, and that's apparently what counts. If Starline thinks he's smarter than him, if he's being portrayed as smarter than him, how has he not thought of that? They can just make new nanobots and fix the problem. Sonic whines that he ruined Tails' gizmo, and he says they're angsting for way too long instead of just running it off. He briefly jumps super high and gets out of the city that it looked like he was trapped in, and thinks that he feels like he's gonna collapse since he looks better, and wonders if this is how everyone feels after a run. Amy asks Sonic to help evacuate Tangle's town. Sonic takes off, and I wonder why time is being wasted with yet another scene of the Deadly Six interacting. Why was it wise of Zavik to have them bide their time? Starline warps to them and says their help is definitely needed as of today. Zavik boasts that he can control 100 robots, but he doesn't say 1,000,000, so why doesn't he just say that? That's what he needs. Why have this scene when we already saw a scene like this? The two of them brag about the very predictable idea that they want to use Eggman's army against them. What's the point of having them say this when it's so predictable? Surprisingly, Starline is smart enough to immediately figure out that Zavik is planning to betray him the minute he steps on board, and remembers that the files said Eggman used the conch. He's done his research though, and being a collector of Eggman's stuff, he uses a portal to get the conch. And what if Sonic kicks it out of his hand again? Should I really care whether the Robians are controlled by Eggman or not when they're gonna act the same way regardless for now? Should Sonic care? I just want them to be more like Robians. I'm relieved that Sonic didn't get roboticized, but it seems to be foreshadowing that he will get that treatment in the next issue if he's really that tired. I can't imagine how many people would have immediately dropped the comic after that would have happened to him. And I bet a ton of people were planning on giving up on the comic the minute Sonic would get roboticized. Even if with a plan to pick it back up after the issue where he got cured. But what if those readers wouldn't hear about that for a really long time? I just don't see how that's good for sales. This arc seems like an audience alienating premise in a nutshell. This issue by Ian Flynn was, at the end of the day, a big waste of time. Thankfully, nobody gets roboticized. And Sonic saves himself because he can jump really high now. Eggman's successful attempt to control the Robians is ruined by Sonic spin dashing straight upwards really high, which only doesn't come off as complete bullshit because I've already seen Sonic X and Boom where he can jump really high. So I've already gotten used to it enough to get past the knee-jerk reaction that it doesn't make sense because he can't do that in the game, when he's already got the magical ability to run super fast, and that's not explained. The only thing relevant about this issue is that it causes Eggman to actually give up on using the right frequency to control the Robians, even assuming that some of them won't respond to it with no evidence. And yet he wants to keep spreading it anyways and says he'll think of something when logically he would have already thought of the obvious flying nanobot cure by now. So Eggman basically gives up on logic, and Starline reveals he does have the conch to control the Zeti. So we should have been shown that earlier. Well, you could skip this issue and miss nothing.